My sister showed up at my boyfriend's apartment with wine, then started getting too comfortable, and in that split second when I pushed open the door to Alex's place using the key he'd given me months ago after we'd talked about moving in together, my world tilted on its axis, the takeout bags from our favorite Thai spot slipping from my hands and spilling pad see ew across the welcome mat he'd bought on our last weekend trip to IKEA, the one where we'd argued about throw pillows but ended up laughing over frozen yogurt in the parking lot. And there she was, my sister Emily, perched on his couch with a glass of red wine in her hand, her legs tucked under her in that casual way she always did when she was flirting, her laughter echoing too warmly in the small living room, lit by the string lights we'd hung together during a rainy Sunday afternoon. And Alex was right there beside her, his arm draped loosely over the back of the couch, not quite touching her shoulder, but close enough that it made my stomach churn with a nausea that had nothing to do with the spilled food. His face flushed in a way I'd only seen when he was relaxed with me, after a long day at his graphic design job where he'd complain about client revisions over microwave dinners we'd share at my kitchen table. And I stood there, frozen in the doorway, the cool evening air from the suburban street behind me mixing with the warmth inside, carrying the scent of her perfume, that vanilla one she'd worn since high school, the one I'd helped her pick out for her first date, and the Merlot they'd clearly been sharing, the bottle half empty on the coffee table next to his laptop, still open to some Netflix show paused mid-episode, probably one of those true crime docs she loved and I'd always teased her about, saying it made her paranoid during our family game nights, back when Mom and Dad were still hosting them before the divorce scattered us a bit. And Emily turned first, her eyes widening in that feigned surprise that didn't quite reach her smile, setting her glass down with a clink that sounded too loud in the sudden silence. "Oh, hey sis, what are you doing here?" she said lightly, as if this was just another impromptu visit like when she'd crashed my place with pizza after a bad shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. But there was something off in her tone, a defensiveness lurking beneath the casualness. And Alex jolted up straighter, his arms snapping back like he'd been burned. "Babe, you're early. I mean, I didn't expect you till after your meeting," he stammered, standing up too quickly and knocking over a coaster, his eyes darting between us, guilt etched in the lines around his mouth that I'd kissed just that morning before he left for work, whispering about our plans for the weekend, maybe a drive to the lake where we'd first said "I love you" under a canopy of stars last summer. And I felt the betrayal sink in like a slow poison, starting in my chest and spreading outward, making my hands tremble as I bent to pick up the takeout bags, the sauce staining my jeans, a pointless distraction from the questions exploding in my mind. How long had this been going on? Had they been texting behind my back on those nights he said he was working late? Or when she canceled our sister lunches, claiming overtime? And I remembered the little things I'd brushed off, like her asking too many questions about him during our coffee runs, or the way he'd mention her name in passing with a fondness that now felt like a knife twist. And as I straightened up, forcing myself to meet their eyes, the room felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of our shared history. Emily and I growing up in that split-level house in the suburbs, sharing secrets under the covers during thunderstorms, her being the one who held my hand through my first heartbreak in college, and now this, her crossing a line that shattered the trust we'd rebuilt after years of sibling rivalry turned into adult friendship. And Alex, the man I'd let in after swearing off relationships post my last toxic ex, the one who'd made me believe in quiet mornings with coffee in bed and future talks about kids someday, now looking at me with a mix of panic and apology that didn't erase the image of them together, so cozy it screamed intimacy. And I dropped the bags again, not caring about the mess, my voice coming out raw and unsteady. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, though part of me didn't want the answer, didn't want to hear the excuses that would confirm the worst. And Emily stood up then, smoothing her skirt in that nervous habit she had since we were kids. "It's not what it looks like, we were just talking. He was helping me with some advice about work stuff," she said, but her cheeks were pink and she wouldn't meet my gaze fully. And Alex nodded too eagerly. "Yeah, exactly, she just stopped by unannounced with the wine as a thank you." His words rang hollow, the bottle telling a different story of lingered time. And I felt the tears prickling, hot and unwelcome, as the initial shock gave way to a deep, aching grief, the kind that hollows you out from the inside, making me wonder if I'd ever really known either of them, if our family dinners where we'd all laugh over Mom's overcooked lasagna had been laced with this undercurrent of deception. And I backed toward the door, grabbing my keys from the hook by instinct, slamming the door behind me and stumbling to my car parked under the streetlight, the suburban neighborhood quiet, except for the distant bark of a dog. And as I drove away, rain starting to patter on the windshield like the tears I finally let fall, I gripped the steering wheel, my mind reeling with the fallout, the calls I'd have to make, the explanations to friends who'd seen us as the perfect couple, the way this would fracture our already fragile family dynamic, Dad probably siding with Emily out of habit, Mom urging therapy like she always did after the divorce, and me left to pick up the pieces of a heart I'd handed over too trustingly, wondering if the pain would ever dull, or if this was the start of a loneliness I'd thought I'd escaped forever. The streetlights blurring through the downpour as I headed home to an empty apartment that suddenly felt too big, too silent, the betrayal echoing in every shadow. The drive home blurred into streaks of red taillights and rain-smeared street signs, my phone buzzing relentlessly on the passenger seat. First Alex's name flashing with call after call, then a string of texts I refused to open, the screen lighting up the dark interior like accusations I wasn't ready to read. And when I finally pulled into my apartment complex parking lot, the engine ticking as it cooled, I sat there, gripping the wheel until my knuckles ached, the same way I used to after long shifts at the marketing firm, when deadlines pressed too hard and I'd come home to silence. Only now, the silence felt like punishment, deliberate and suffocating, and I dragged myself upstairs, keys jingling too loudly in the quiet hallway, unlocking the door to the place Alex and I had started calling ours, even though his name wasn't on the lease yet, his toothbrush still by the sink, his favorite hoodie slung over the back of the couch where we'd watched entire seasons of that baking competition show while eating cold cereal straight from the box. And the moment I stepped inside, the familiar smell of his cologne mixed with the lavender candle I'd lit 2 nights ago hit me like a slap, making my knees buckle so I had to brace against the wall, sliding down until I was sitting on the hardwood floor that still bore faint scuff marks from when we danced badly to old pop songs after too much cheap wine. And I let the tears come then, ugly and loud, the kind that make your throat raw and your eyes swell, because holding them back in the car had felt like swallowing glass. And now everything spilled out. The image of Emily's legs curled under her on his couch, the way his fingers had hovered near her shoulder, the half-empty bottle that said they'd been there long enough to settle in, to relax, to forget I existed for a while. And I thought about calling Mom, the way she'd answer on the second ring even at this hour, her voice soft with that practice calm she'd developed after the divorce, ready to listen without judgment. But I couldn't bear the pity yet. Couldn't stand to hear her say, "I always thought she was a little too close to your boyfriends," the way she had once about my college ex. So instead, I crawled to the couch, pulled a throw blanket over my head, and let the sobs shake me until my phone finally stopped vibrating, the battery probably dead. And sometime after midnight, I forced myself up, splashed cold water on my face in the bathroom where his razor still sat on the shelf next to mine, and stared at my reflection. Puffy eyes, mascara tracks, the same face Emily used to mirror in our twin beds growing up, the one she'd tease about my crooked smile until we both laughed so hard we couldn't breathe. And the betrayal twisted deeper because it wasn't just Alex, it was her, the person who'd once stitched up my knee after I fell off my bike, who'd stayed up all night when I had my first panic attack in sophomore year, whispering that everything would be okay. And now she'd chosen him over me in the cruelest, quietest way. And I stripped the bed of the sheets we'd bought together at Target last spring, the ones with the tiny blue flowers she'd helped me pick because they remind me of that lake trip we took as kids. And I shoved them into the hamper, replaced them with the plain white set I'd kept in the linen closet for guests, as if that small act could erase the nights we'd tangled in them talking about futures that now felt like lies. And when the new sheets were on, stiff and cool, I climbed in alone, curling into a ball on what used to be his side, breathing in the faint detergent smell instead of him. And the grief came in waves. First rage at how easily they'd slipped into comfort with each other, then a bone-deep sorrow for the sister I thought I knew, the one who'd text me memes at 2 a.m. when she couldn't sleep after a hard shift, who'd show up with coffee and bagels the morning after my promotion, beaming like she'd wanted herself. And I wondered what had shifted in her, if it was jealousy over my relationship, or loneliness from her string of failed dates, or something darker I couldn't name. And around 3 in the morning, my phone, plugged in now, lit up with a single message from her. "I'm so sorry. Can we talk, please?" No excuses, no deflection, just those 6 words that felt both too little and impossibly heavy. And I stared at them until the screen dimmed, my thumb hovering over reply, but I couldn't find the energy to type anything that wouldn't explode into more hurt. So I turned the phone face down, pulled the blanket tighter, and let the rain drum against the window like it had the night we'd first slept over at Alex's old place, back when everything felt safe and new. And now, the same sound mocked me, reminding me how quickly safety could vanish, how trust could fracture in an instant over wine and too close laughter. And as exhaustion finally pulled me under, I clung to one small, stubborn thought, that tomorrow I'd have to decide whether to let them explain, whether I even wanted their version of the truth, or if the image burned into my mind was already answer enough. And sleep came fitful and shallow, haunted by fragments of their voices overlapping in my dreams, soft and intimate in ways that used to belong only to me. The next morning arrived gray and heavy, the kind of Monday where the sky presses down on the suburbs like it knows you're already carrying too much, and I woke up on the couch because the bedroom had felt too empty, too full of ghosts, my neck stiff from the awkward angle, eyes gritty from crying myself out sometime around dawn, and the first thing I did was check my phone. Not for Alex's messages, which had piled up overnight in a silent parade of apologies and explanations I still couldn't face, but for anything from Emily, and there it was, another text sent at 4:17 a.m. I didn't sleep. I keep replaying it. I hate myself right now. Please let me know you're okay. No emojis, no excuses this time, just raw words that almost cracked the wall I'd started building, but I set the phone down without replying, Made coffee in the machine Alex had bought me for my birthday last year because you deserve better than instant. The rich smell filling the kitchen while I stared at the calendar stuck to the fridge with a magnet from our trip to the aquarium. Today was supposed to be parent-teacher conferences for my niece, Lily, Emily's 12-year-old daughter. The one thing we still did together every semester, trading off who brought the snacks and who asked the hard questions about math grades. And the thought of seeing her today, of sitting in that fluorescent lit classroom pretending everything was fine while Lily chattered about her latest art project, made my stomach lurch so hard I almost dropped the mug. Because how could I look at my sister across a tiny desk and not see her curled on Alex's couch, wine glass in hand, laughing the way she used to laugh with me during late-night talks on the back porch after Lily's dad left, and we'd promised each other we'd always have each other's backs. And now that promise felt like ash, so I texted Mom instead, fingers shaking, "Can you go to Lily's conference today? Something came up." She replied almost instantly, "Of course, honey. Everything all right?" And I typed, "Fine, just work," before I could second-guess the lie, because the truth would spill out too fast, too messy, and I wasn't ready to watch her face crumple the way it had when she found out about Dad's affair years ago, the same quiet devastation that had taught me how to hide my own pain behind schedules and small talk. I showered quickly, dressed in the same jeans from last night with the faint sauce stain still there like evidence, and drove to the office because routine was the only anchor I had left, answering emails about campaign deadlines while my mind kept circling back to Lily, how she'd text me silly selfies with filters, call me Auntie Cool when she wanted to borrow my earrings, how she'd once drawn a picture of the three of us, me, her, Emily, holding hands under a rainbow after a storm, and the idea of her finding out, of her bright trust cracking the way mine had, felt worse than anything Alex or Emily could have done to me directly. So when my lunch break came, I drove to the school anyway, parked far enough back that Emily wouldn't spot my car, and watched from across the lot as she walked Lily inside, her nurse scrub swapped for jeans and a cardigan, hair pulled back the way she did when she was tired, and Lily skipping ahead, backpack bouncing, oblivious. And something in my chest loosened just enough to breathe. Emily was still showing up for her daughter, still the mom who packed organic snacks and volunteered for field trips, and that mattered, had to matter, even if right now I wanted to hate her for everything else. I waited until they were inside, then texted her, "We need to talk. Not today, not with Lily around, but soon. And you tell me everything. No half-truths." Her reply came after a long pause, "Okay, whenever you're ready. I'm not going anywhere." I stared at those words until they blurred, then drove home, stopped at the grocery store on autopilot, bought ingredients for the spaghetti Lily loved because I'd promised to cook for her next weekend, the normalcy of picking out tomatoes and garlic feeling both absurd and necessary, like proof that life kept moving even when your heart had stopped. And when I got back to the apartment, I found Alex sitting on the steps outside my door, hoodie up against the drizzle, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept either, and for a second, I almost turned around, but he stood up slowly, hands in his pockets, voice low. "I just need 5 minutes, please." I let him in because shutting the door in his face felt too final, too much like giving up on the possibility of understanding, and we sat at opposite ends of the couch, the space between us vast, the rain tapping the windows like it was trying to fill the silence, and he started talking, halting, ashamed, about how Emily had shown up upset after a fight with her ex over custody, how he'd only meant to listen, how the wine had been her idea, how nothing physical had happened, how he'd been stupid and weak and terrified of losing me. And I listened without interrupting, letting the words land like stones in deep water, ripples spreading through the ache in my chest. And when he finished, I said only, "I believe you about the physical part, but the emotional part, that hurts worse. You let her in where I should have been the only one." He nodded, tears slipping down his face now, and I didn't reach for him, didn't offer comfort, just let him sit with it while I stared at the floor, thinking about boundaries I'd never had to draw before, about protecting Lily meant protecting what was left of us, too, even if that meant keeping distance until the hurt stopped feeling like fire every time I breathed. And when he finally left, promising to give me space, I locked the door behind him, leaned against it, and felt the smallest flicker of relief. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the knowledge that I could set the pace, that I could choose when and how the next conversation happened, and the family I still wanted to keep intact didn't have to shatter completely if I guarded the pieces carefully enough. By Wednesday, the apartment felt less like a crime scene and more like a holding cell, every corner reminding me of conversations I couldn't finish and touches I couldn't trust. So when my boss asked if I could work remotely for the rest of the week because of personal reasons I didn't explain, I just said yes and packed an overnight bag with the kind of efficiency that comes from wanting to run without admitting it, throwing in leggings, my favorite oversized sweater that still smelled faintly of the bonfire Alex and I had sat around last fall with friends who kept asking when we were getting engaged, and the journal I'd started after my last therapy session 6 months ago when I'd promised myself I'd write down the hard things instead of swallowing them, and I texted Mom that I was coming to stay for a couple nights, no details, just need some space, be there in an hour, and she replied with a simple heart emoji and doors open, fridge is stocked, the way she always did when one of us was unraveling, no questions until I was ready, a habit she'd perfected after watching Dad leave and then watching us both try to pretend it didn't break something fundamental. The drive to her townhouse in the next suburb over took longer than usual because of construction on the highway, orange cones funneling traffic into one lane like life narrowing itself down, and I listened to a podcast about grief that felt too on the nose, so I switched to silence. Just the hum of tires on wet asphalt and the occasional swipe of wipers, my mind replaying Alex's halting confession on the steps, Emily's late-night texts that kept arriving like apologies delivered by carrier pigeon, each one shorter, more stripped. I messed up so badly. I miss you. I'm scared you'll never talk to me again. And I hadn't answered any of them yet. Not because I wanted to punish, but because every time I tried to type something, the words turned to accusations, or worse, forgiveness I wasn't sure I meant. So I let them sit unread in the chain, little landmines I'd step on later. Mom's house smelled like cinnamon from the apple crisp she always baked when she sensed trouble, the kind of comfort food that didn't fix anything but made the air feel softer. And she hugged me at the door without speaking, her arms steady the way they'd been when I was 13, and crying over a fight with Emily about who got the bigger bedroom. And we sat at the kitchen island with mugs of chamomile while rain tapped the skylight overhead, and I told her everything in pieces. Emily showing up at Alex's, the wine, the laughter I'd walked in on, the way my stomach had dropped like I'd missed a step on stairs. And she listened, nodding slowly, her eyes filling but not spilling, and when I finished, she reached across the counter, squeezed my hand, and said only, "That's a deep cut, sweetheart," from both of them. No platitudes about blood being thicker or love conquering all, just acknowledgement that made the ache in my chest loosen a fraction. And then she asked the practical question, "What do you need right now?" And I surprised myself by saying, rules. I need to figure out what I can live with and what I can't. So we talked logistics over leftover lasagna she reheated because eating helps, about how I'd tell Alex I needed full transparency, no more unannounced drop-ins from anyone, phone access if I asked, no secrets about who he was texting even if it was just work friends, and how with Emily it was trickier because of Lily, because I couldn't cut her out completely without cutting out my niece too, so maybe supervised visits for a while, maybe family dinners only if Mom was there as buffer, maybe therapy for her to unpack whatever loneliness or resentment had driven her to cross that line. And Mom listened, jotting notes on the back of an envelope the way she used to when we were planning Christmas, turning chaos into checklists. And by the time the dishwasher started its cycle, I felt the first thin thread of control return, not over their choices, but my own, over the boundaries I'd let erode because I'd wanted to believe we were all too close for harm. Later that night, after Mom went to bed, I sat on the guest room futon with my phone, finally opened Emily's messages, read them one by one until the screen glowed against the dark, and typed back the first real response since Friday. "I'm at Mom's. I'm angry and hurt, and I don't know when that will change, but I don't want Lily caught in the middle. We can meet next week. Coffee shop, neutral ground, no wine, no excuses until I ask for them. And you need to start seeing someone, a therapist, because this isn't just about Alex, it's about us too." I hit send before I could overthink it, watched the delivered tick turn to red, saw the 3 dots appear, then vanish twice like she was writing and deleting, and finally her reply came. "Okay. Thank you for even answering. I booked an appointment for Thursday. I'll send you the name if you want proof. I love you, even if I've been terrible at showing it." I didn't reply again, just set the phone on the nightstand and lay back staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles, thinking about the weekend I'd planned with Alex, maybe a hike, maybe just take out and a movie, and how instead I'd spend it here, in the house where Emily and I used to share secrets and clothes and dreams, now needing to rebuild something smaller but sturdier. And as sleep crept in, I felt the weight of decision settle. Not absolution, not reunion, but a deliberate choice to leave the door cracked instead of slamming it shut, because walking away from my sister meant walking away from pieces of myself I still wanted to keep, and that, at least tonight, felt like enough reason to keep breathing through the hurt. The coffee shop on Maple Street smelled like burnt espresso and damp coats, the kind of place where people came to hide in plain sight, laptops open but eyes distant, and I arrived 10 minutes early on purpose, claiming a corner table near the window where rain streaked the glass in slow, uneven lines, ordered a black coffee I knew I wouldn't finish because my stomach was already knotted tight, and sat there watching the door while I traced the rim of the cup with my thumb, the same nervous habit Emily used to tease me about when we were teenagers waiting for rides home from soccer practice. And when she walked in, hair damp from the drizzle, wearing the navy coat I'd bought her 2 Christmases ago because she said her old one made her look like a cop, she scanned the room until our eyes met, and for a second, neither of us moved, the space between us heavy with everything unsaid. Then she gave a small, tentative nod and ordered at the counter, her voice too quiet for me to hear over the hiss of the milk steamer. She approached slowly, like she was afraid I'd bolt, set her latte down across from me, and sat without speaking at first, just looking at me with eyes that were redder than mine had been last week, the skin underneath bruised with sleeplessness. And I noticed her nails were bitten shorter than usual, a habit she'd kicked in college but apparently picked up again, and that small detail cracked something in me. Not forgiveness, but recognition that she was hurting too, maybe in ways I hadn't let myself imagine yet. "Thank you for coming," she said finally, voice low enough that the couple at the next table didn't glance over, and I nodded once, not trusting myself to say, "You're welcome," because it wasn't, not really. Then I laid out the one rule I'd decided on during the long nights at Mom's. I need to hear it all, start to finish. No editing for my feelings. And after you talk, I get to decide what happens next. No arguing. She swallowed, wrapped both hands around her cup like it was anchoring her, and began, halting at first, then steadier, about how the loneliness had crept in after her divorce finalized last year, how shifts at the hospital left her too wired to sleep and too exhausted to date, how she'd started texting Alex more when I was swamped with the big campaign launch because he answered fast and made her laugh with dumb memes, how one night after a 12-hour shift, she'd driven to his place uninvited, with the wine as an excuse to vent about her ex wanting more weekends with Lily, how the conversation had stretched longer than it should have, how she'd let herself lean into the warmth of being seen and listened to without judgment, how she knew the moment his arm went around the couch back that she was crossing a line, but couldn't stop, because for once, someone was choosing her first. And the shame in her voice when she said that last part made my own anger stutter, because I recognized the hunger in it, the same one I'd felt after Dad left and I'd dated anyone who paid attention. And she finished by saying, "I never wanted to hurt you. I told myself it was innocent until it wasn't, and by then I was too deep in my own mess to pull back. I'm starting therapy tomorrow, cognitive behavioral, the one the hospital recommends for staff burnout, and I'm going to keep going even if you never speak to me again. But I hope you will. Someday." I let the words settle, the steam from our drinks curling between us, and felt the first real breath I'd taken in days. Not easy, but less ragged. Then I told her my side. Not the rage I'd already spilled to Mom, but the quieter grief. How I'd started to believe Alex and I were building something solid. How her showing up like that had made me question every late-night text I'd ignored. Every time I'd brushed off her questions about him as sisterly interest. How the betrayal felt double because it came from the two people I'd let closest after years of keeping walls up. And how protecting Lily meant I couldn't disappear completely, but I also couldn't pretend nothing happened. We sat in silence after that, the kind that isn't empty but full. Rain still falling outside, someone's phone buzzing unanswered at another table. And eventually I said, "I'm seeing someone too. Individual sessions, starting next Tuesday. I need to figure out what trust looks like now, for me." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks unchecked, and reached halfway across the table but stopped, hand hovering. And I didn't close the distance, but I didn't pull away either. Just let my own fingers rest near hers on the wood, close enough to feel the warmth without touching. And that small space felt like the first honest thing we'd shared in weeks. When we stood to leave, she asked, tentative, "Can I text you updates? About therapy, about Lily, just normal stuff?" And I considered saying no, but the thought of weeks stretching into silence made my chest ache differently. So I said, "Once a week, short updates, nothing about him unless I ask." She agreed immediately, relief flickering across her face like sunlight breaking through clouds, and as we stepped outside under the awning, rain drumming on the metal above us, she turned and said softly, "I love you. I know I broke that trust, but I still mean it." And I couldn't say it back yet, the words stuck somewhere between my heart and my throat, but I managed, "I know." And that was enough for now, a foothold in the long climb back towards something resembling us. I drove home alone, the apartment still quiet but less hostile, made tea instead of wine, lit the lavender candle Alex had left behind because the smell no longer felt like betrayal but like memory. And when my phone pinged later with a photo from Emily, Lily holding up a clay sculpture she'd made in art class, captioned, "She says hi to Auntie Cool," I let myself smile, small and careful, the first crack of light in what had felt like endless dark. Proof that the family threads, frayed and knotted, were still there if we were willing to mend them slowly, stitch by painful stitch. The therapist's office was on the third floor of a nondescript building downtown, the kind with beige carpets and abstract prints that were supposed to be calming, but mostly looked like someone had spilled paint and called it art. And when Alex and I walked in together for the first time 3 weeks after that coffee shop meeting with Emily, the air felt thick with the scent of eucalyptus diffusers and the low hum of white noise from a machine in the corner. And I sat on the far end of the gray sectional while he took the chair opposite, leaving the middle cushion empty, like neutral territory, our knees not quite pointing at each other, but not turned away either. A small geography of caution we'd both agreed to in the parking lot when he'd asked if I wanted him to wait in the car, and I'd said no because hiding felt worse than awkwardness now. Dr. Patel, mid-40s, calm voice, dark hair pulled back neatly, started by asking us each to say one sentence about why we were here, no interruptions, and I went first, staring at the carpet instead of him. I walked in on my boyfriend and my sister sharing wine and space in a way that felt intimate, and even though nothing physical happened, the emotional closeness shattered my trust in both of them. And I'm here because I want to know if I can rebuild it without losing myself. Alex swallowed hard, then spoke. I let a moment of comfort turn into something that hurt the person I love most, and I didn't set boundaries when I should have because I was afraid of seeming unkind, and I'm here because I want to learn how to choose her every time, even when it's hard. Dr. Patel nodded, no judgment in her expression, just a quiet invitation to keep going. And over the next 40 minutes, we mapped the fault lines, the late-night texts I'd never seen but now suspected were more frequent than he'd admitted, the way Emily's loneliness had found a soft spot in his empathy, the resentment I'd buried about always being the reliable one in my family, while she got to be the spontaneous, charming sister. And when she asked us to name the deepest fear underneath it all, I surprised myself by saying, that I'll never feel safe being vulnerable again, that every quiet moment will feel like waiting for the next betrayal. And Alex's voice cracked when he answered, That she'll leave and I'll deserve it, that I've proven I'm not worth trusting with her heart. The words hung there, raw and unadorned, and for the first time since that night, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness rushing in, but a door cracking open just enough to let air through. And Dr. Patel suggested a small exercise. Sit facing each other on the couch, no touching yet, and each say one thing we still appreciated about the other, despite the pain. I went first, voice steadier than I expected. I appreciate how you always remember the little things, like bringing me chamomile when I have a migraine, or texting me a photo of the sunset when you're stuck in traffic, because those moments made me feel seen in ways no one else ever did. He looked at me like the words were oxygen after drowning, then said, I appreciate how honest you are, even when it hurts, like the way you told me straight that the emotional part cut deeper than anything physical could, because it forces me to face what I actually did, instead of hiding behind it didn't go that far. We sat with that for a long beat, the clock ticking softly, rain starting again outside the window in a gentle patter that matched the slow rhythm of our breathing, and when the session ended, she gave us homework. One act of transparency each day for the next week, sharing a password if asked, texting locations when apart, answering any question without defensiveness, and one small non-sexual gesture of connection, like holding hands for 30 seconds before bed or goodbye. No expectation beyond the contact itself. We left the building together, umbrellas bumping in the narrow doorway, and in the parking garage, he paused by my car, rain dripping from the concrete above us, and asked quietly, Can I walk you to your door tonight, just to say goodnight? I hesitated, the old instinct to pull back warring with the new fragile wish to try, and nodded once. Later, after takeout Thai, we ate mostly in silence at my kitchen table, the same spot where we used to plan weekends and laugh over spilled sauce. He stood when it was time to go, and I walked him to the door, heart thudding too loud. Then, before he could step out, I reached for his hand, lacing our fingers the way we used to on long drives, held for the full 30 seconds Dr. Patel had prescribed, feeling the familiar callus on his thumb, the slight tremor in his grip, and neither of us spoke, just stood there, letting the warmth travel between palms, like a promise we weren't ready to voice yet. When I let go, he looked at me with eyes that were wet but steady, whispered, Thank you, and left without pushing for more. And I closed the door, leaned against it the way I had so many nights ago, but this time the ache was different. Still deep, still tender, but threaded with something quieter, a tentative belief that closeness could be rebuilt not in grand gestures, but these small deliberate acts, one held hand, one honest sentence, one shared silence at a time. And as I turned off the kitchen light and headed to bed alone, but not entirely lonely, I thought about texting Emily a short update. First couple session done. Hard, but good hard. And when her reply came almost immediately, just a heart emoji and proud of you, I let it land without anger. A small bridge between the parts of my life I was still trying to hold together. Proof that healing didn't mean erasing the hurt, but learning to carry it differently, with room beside it for hope that was starting, against all odds, to feel real. The cabin smelled of pine and last year's wood smoke when we arrived Friday evening, the three of us, me, Alex, and Lily, in my car because Emily had begged off the whole weekend with a last-minute shift swap she claimed was unavoidable, though we both knew it was her giving me space to test this fragile new normal without her shadow in the room. And Lily bounced out first, backpack slung over one shoulder, already running up the gravel path to the porch where string lights hung crooked from the railing the way they had last summer when the four of us had come here together, laughing over s'mores and bad charades until the fire died down and the stars felt close enough to touch. And now the memory stung differently, layered with what had happened since. But Lily didn't know any of it, or at least pretended not to, chattering about the canoe we'd promised to take out tomorrow and the board games she'd packed. Monopoly, but we're banning the banker cheating this time, Auntie. And I forced a smile, helped unload the cooler while Alex carried the duffels inside, his movements careful around me like he was still learning where the sore spots were. The first night passed in small, deliberate pieces. Dinner was grilled cheese and tomato soup because the stove was finicky and none of us wanted to fight with it, eaten at the scarred pine table while rain tapped the metal roof in steady rhythm, Lily telling us about her science fair project on solar ovens that had earned second place last week, her hands waving as she explained how aluminum foil reflected the heat, and Alex listened with the same focused attention he used to give me when I talked about work deadlines, nodding, asking real questions. Did you use black paper inside to absorb more? And I watched them, the easy way he made her feel smart and heard, and felt a pang that wasn't quite jealousy anymore, but something softer, almost grateful. Because even after everything, he was still good with her, still the person who'd taught her how to skip stones on the lake last year. And when she yawned and headed to the loft bedroom with her sleeping bag and phone charger, promising not to stay up texting friends, we cleaned up in near silence, shoulders brushing at the sink. And when the dishes were done, he turned to me, drying his hands on a faded towel, and said quietly, "Thank you for letting me come. I know it's not easy." I didn't answer right away, just looked out the window at the dark lake rippling under the moon, then said, "It's for Lily, too. She asked why we hadn't done a trip in so long." He nodded, accepting that without pushing, and we moved to the couch, fire crackling low in the stone hearth, and instead of turning on the TV, we sat with a blanket between us, close enough that our knees touched when we shifted, and after a while, I reached for his hand. Not the 30-second exercise anymore, but longer, fingers threading together naturally, his thumb tracing slow circles on the back of my hand the way he used to when we drove home from late movies, and I let myself feel it, the warmth, the familiarity, without rushing to name what came next. Saturday dawned clear, cold air sharp with the promise of fall, and we took the canoe out after breakfast, Lily in the middle calling out directions like a tiny captain, Alex paddling stern, me in bow watching the water part around us, loons calling across the lake in that haunting way that always made everything feel smaller and bigger at once. And when we stopped in the middle to drift, Lily trailing her fingers in the cold water, she suddenly asked, "Are you guys fighting again?" The question landed like a stone skipped wrong, sinking fast, and I froze, paddle dripping, while Alex's breath caught beside me. We'd agreed not to lie to her, not outright, so I turned halfway and said, "We had a big disagreement, yeah, we're working on it. That's why this weekend matters, figuring out how to be us again." She nodded slowly, chewing her lip the way Emily did when she was thinking hard, then said, "Mom cries sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep. She says she messed up with you. I don't want her to be sad forever." The honesty of it cracked me open, and I reached back to squeeze her knee, voice thick. "I don't either. We're all trying to fix what got broken. It takes time, but we're not giving up." Alex's eyes met mine over her head, wet and steady, and he added softly, "Your mom loves you more than anything, kiddo, and so do we. That part never changed." Lily leaned forward then, hugged me awkwardly around the life jacket, and whispered, "I love you too, Auntie. Don't stop coming to see me, okay?" I promised I wouldn't, throat tight, and when we paddled back, the sun was high, warming the wood of the dock, and after lunch, peanut butter sandwiches and apples on the porch, Lily disappeared inside to read her graphic novel, while Alex and I walked the trail that circled the lake, leaves crunching underfoot, and halfway around, at the spot where we'd once carved our initials into a birch tree like teenagers, he stopped, turned to me, and without preamble said, "I'm in love with you. Still. More, maybe, because I almost lost you and realized how much I took for granted. I don't expect you to say it back yet, but I needed you to hear it here, where it started feeling real." The words settled into the quiet between us, wind rustling the trees, water lapping the shore, and I stepped closer, rested my forehead against his chest, felt his heartbeat fast under the flannel, and whispered, "I'm getting there. Not all the way, but closer than I thought I'd be." He wrapped his arms around me then, slow and careful, and we stood like that until the chill drove us back, holding on longer than we had in months, the embrace not erasing the scar, but wrapping around it, making room for the hurt and the healing side by side. That night, after Lily fell asleep early from fresh air and too much sun, we sat by the fire again, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me, and when the flames died to embers, I kissed him. Soft, tentative, tasting like wood smoke and second chances, and it wasn't fireworks, but something steadier, a quiet returning that felt earned. And as we climbed the stairs to the bedroom we'd once shared so easily, we didn't rush, just undressed slowly, touched with reverence of people who knew how fragile closeness could be. And finally, when we came together, it was careful, honest, less about reclaiming and more about rediscovering, tears mixing with laughter when we bumped noses, whispers of "I'm here" and "I'm sorry," blending into something that sounded almost like forgiveness. And in the dark afterward, his heartbeat steady against my ear, I thought about Emily waiting back home, probably pacing her kitchen with a cup of tea gone cold, and felt the first real softening toward her. Not full trust, not yet, but a willingness to believe she was working too, that the family we almost lost could still hold if we all kept showing up, scarred and sorry and trying. And as sleep pulled me under with Alex's arm heavy across my waist, the lake whispering outside, I let myself hope, just a little, that the weekend had shifted something permanent, that the mending we'd started in therapy rooms and coffee shops could finish here, in the ordinary magic of grilled cheese, canoe drifts, and a slow, hard-won embrace that promised not perfection, but persistence. And that, for now, felt like more than enough. A year to the day since that rainy Friday, I walked into Alex's apartment and found my sister there with wine and too much ease. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven. Not the canned kind, but the ones Lily and I had made from scratch last night after she begged to stay over, her laughter filling the apartment the way it used to, before everything cracked. And now, the timer beeped soft while I stood at the counter pouring coffee into 3 mismatched mugs, the same ones we'd used on lazy Sunday mornings back when trust felt automatic, and Alex came up behind me, not quite touching, but close enough that I felt his warmth through my sweater, set his chin lightly on my shoulder, and murmured, "Smells like home." The words simple, but weighted with everything we'd carried to get here, and I leaned back just enough to let our bodies connect, a small yes that had become habit again over months of careful rebuilding. Lily bounded in from the living room where she'd been sprawled on the rug with her sketch pad, charcoal smudged on her cheek, waving a drawing of the three of us on the cabin porch last fall. "Look, I added the string lights even though they were crooked." And we laughed, the sound easy, unforced, as she taped it to the fridge next to the photo strip from the aquarium we'd gone to in June, the one where Alex had won her a stuffed otter by playing those rigged claw machines until his quarters ran out. And I'd watched them from the bench, feeling something settle in my chest. Not the old certainty, but a new, quieter one that had learned to live alongside the scar. Emily arrived at 10, right on time, carrying a bakery box of Danishes because I didn't want to show up empty-handed. Her smile tentative but real, hair pulled back the way she did for long shifts, and when she stepped inside, Lily ran to her, hugged her waist hard, then dragged her to see the new drawing, chattering about how we were going to the park later to feed the ducks, and Emily met my eyes over Lily's head, a silent check-in we'd developed in these slow months. Coffee once a month at first, then every other week, always neutral ground, always short, always ending with her saying, "I'm still going to therapy," and me nodding, letting the updates about her work stress or Lily's latest obsession land without deflection or defense. And somewhere between the third month and the sixth, the anger had dulled from fire to embers. Not gone, but manageable, something I could carry without burning myself every day. We sat around the table with coffee and rolls, plates clinking, conversation drifting over safe things, Lily's upcoming middle school transition, Alex's new freelance client who kept changing deadlines, Emily's promotion to charge nurse that meant steadier hours and less guilt about missing bedtime stories. And when Lily ran off to grab her jacket for the park, the three of us adults fell into a brief quiet, the kind that used to feel loaded but now just felt like breathing room. And Emily spoke first, voice low. "I still think about that night every time I open a bottle of wine. I don't buy red anymore." I looked at her, really looked, the faint lines around her eyes deeper than before, but her gaze steady, and said, "I still think about it too, but not every day, not like I used to." Alex reached under the table, found my hand, squeezed once, and added quietly, "We're not pretending it didn't happen, we're just choosing what comes after." Emily nodded, tears shining but not falling, and whispered, "I'm so glad you chose this. All of this." Lily burst back in then, demanding we hurry before the ducks ate all the breadcrumbs, and the moment broke gently, naturally into motion. Coats zipped, keys jingled, the door locked behind us as we walked to the park 3 blocks away, Lily skipping ahead between Alex and Emily, holding both their hands, while I trailed a step behind, watching them, the easy rhythm of family that had been fractured, but not destroyed, pieced back with therapy notes and honest silences, and small apologies repeated until they stuck. At the pond, the ducks swarmed, greedy and loud, Lily tossing crumbs and giggling when one nipped too close, and Alex stood beside me on the bench, arm around my shoulders, not possessive, but present, and I rested my head against him, felt the steady rise and fall of his breathing, thought about the nights I'd slept alone, the mornings I'd woken wondering if trust could ever regrow, and realized it had. Not the same green shoot as before, but tougher, rooted deeper because it knew what drought felt like. Emily joined us after Lily ran out of bread, sat on my other side, close enough that our shoulders touched, and for a minute we just watched the water ripple, the ducks drifting away, the late September sun low and gold, and she said softly, "I love you, sis. I know I said it before and it didn't mean enough, but I mean it now, every day." I turned, met her eyes, saw the same sister who'd once braided my hair before school pictures, who'd held me when our parents fought, who'd messed up spectacularly and then worked to make it right, and I answered, "I love you too. It's different now, but it's still love." The words came easier than I expected. Not erased pain, but pain that had been carried long enough to lighten. We walked home as the light faded, Lily chattering about dinner, pizza she voted, with extra cheese, and when we reached the apartment steps, Emily hugged me first, then Alex, then Lily one more time, before heading to her car, promising to text when she got home, and as her taillights disappeared around the corner, I felt the last knot in my chest loosen. Not gone forever, but no longer choking me. Inside, Alex started the oven for a second round of cinnamon rolls because Lily deserves seconds, and I stood in the doorway watching him move through the kitchen with the same quiet competence he'd always had, now layered with a gratitude that showed in the way he glanced back at me every few minutes, just to check I was still there, and when he caught me looking, he smiled, small, real, the smile that had first made me believe in quiet futures, and I crossed the room, wrapped my arms around him from behind, pressed my cheek to his back, and whispered, "We made it through." And he turned, cupped my face, kissed me slow and sure, tasting like coffee and second chances, and said against my lips, "We're still making it, every day." Later, after pizza and board games and Lily falling asleep on the couch mid-movie, tangled in a blanket with the stuffed otter beside her, Alex and I sat on the balcony with one last cup of coffee, city lights flickering below, the air cool with the first hint of fall, and I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, shattered, furious, certain nothing could mend, and the woman I was now, scarred, yes, cautious still, but open in ways I hadn't known I could be again, and I reached for his hand across the small table, laced our fingers, felt the familiar callus, the steady pulse, and knew this wasn't a fairy tale ending, but something better. A beginning that had survived winter, that carried its history without apology, that chose each other not because it was easy, but because it was worth the hard work of showing up, again and again, with honesty and patience, and the quiet hope that love, when it's tended carefully, can grow stronger in the places it once broke.